The Addams Family Chronicles continue. Chapter 17. A Lesson in High Finance. Life is all about making good and bad decisions. The choices we make shape us as we grow and learn, and the experience we gain from them is worth far more than what we lose in the process. Such was the case for the three youngest children in the Addams family household in the early 1970s, as they ventured into the world of high finance for the very first time. The Addams children never had much money. It was something that was felt unnecessary by their parents. Aside from their weekly allowance of 10 to 25 cents per week, the only realization of any semblance of wealth would occur around birthdays, when generous grandparents would send well-wishing birthday cards containing a crisp $1 bill for their spending pleasure. Of course, no sooner had the money crossed their palms when it was spent frivolously and indulgently on whatever whim the children were entertaining at that moment. Never would they even contemplate saving it, as this strategy seemed counter to every reason for having money in the first place. "Why don't you save your money?" Mom would ask. "There might be something that you might want to buy that you haven't even thought of yet. Wouldn't it be a shame not to have any money when you might need it?" While Mom's questions fell flatly on deaf ears of her three youngest children, Lynn, the oldest, saw the wisdom in her words. After all, he had tasted the fruit of wealth, having been gainfully employed since the age of 13. And he understood that accumulating wealth not only offered security, it led to autonomy and freedom. With his money, he was able to purchase stereos and records, posters and sunglasses. But to buy such nice things, he always had the foresight to save for them. This knowledge would prove to be a crucial advantage when dealing with his financially naive siblings. Granddad also knew the value of money. He lived simply atop a mountain, isolated from the perils of revolving credit and corporate greed. He knew what poverty was, having started his family in the midst of the Great Depression, working the land for their sustenance, hoping and eventually planning for a better future. And all through his life, he clung to his meager lifestyle, always saving, enjoying the liberty his frugality afforded him. But what he enjoyed saving above all else were coins, old coins. Granddad was a knowledgeable numismatist. He liked to save coins that had worth. Each time the Addams children would come to visit, he was sure to show them his coins, explaining the history behind them and pointing out the various attributes that made each coin special. The children listened and marveled at his coins, noticing how different they looked from the money they had seen. But what seemed to intrigue the children the most was his collection of silver dollars. He had several. Not only did he have Morgan silver dollars, but he also had peace dollars. He seemed to have at least one from each year of production. Some were in good condition. Others were so worn that the date could scarcely be read. The younger children had no concept of their worth. They only saw a lot of money. Lynn saw a lot more than that. And so, at the end of one of their visits to the mountain, Granddad seized the opportunity to pass on some of the wealth that he had amassed. He gathered up 28 of the dollars and gave each of the children 7 apiece. Now, these dollars are not for spending. They're for saving. And as the years go by, they'll increase in value. And you'll enjoy them long after I am gone. His legacy was now in the hands of his 4 children, in the form of 28 pieces of silver, about the same amount of money that Judas was given for his betrayal of Jesus. Would history repeat itself? The unexpected windfall elicited a fair amount of introspection on the part of the younger children. Though they were excited about the money, they began to wonder about the worth of the money if it could not be spent. Sure, it was nice to look at, but in the grand scheme of things, the money had no utility. All it took was for Lynn to hear young Eric complain of this very dilemma. Lynn had an idea. "Hey, Eric, I'll tell you what. I'll give you 14 half-dollar coins for your 7 silver dollars." Eric's eyes lit up. The opportunity to have some real money to spend was just too much for him to pass up. Mom looked on with concern, hearing the bargain being struck without her input, unsure of whether or not this financial lesson should be allowed to proceed. "Now, Eric, Granddad gave you those coins to keep. They're worth far more than those half-dollars. I don't think you understand how much you're giving up." Mom was doing her best to dissuade him from trading his dollars, but the seed had been planted and had already taken root. "But Mom, I can't spend those silver dollars. What good are they to me? Please, I want the half-dollars." Mom realized Eric was hard-headed and sat silently deliberating on whether to intervene further. Lynn held his breath, and the other children both waited for the verdict to be rendered. After a few moments, Mom sighed and began to speak. "Okay, Eric. You'll be sorry someday for not listening to me. There's nothing I can say to make you rethink this decision. I hope you enjoy spending the money that your grandfather gave you, but I think Granddad would be very disappointed in you." Eric ran enthusiastically into the other room to retrieve his silver dollars. And just as Lynn had promised, he gave Eric 14 Kennedy half-dollars in exchange. And no sooner had Eric walked away, Keith and Alicia stood offering their silver to Lynn on the same terms, which Lynn greedily accepted. The loss of those coins would not be felt for some time. Sure, every so often he would think about what a dumb trade that was. But as he grew to maturity, he would have feelings of anger and resentment that his brother had taken advantage of him like that. And he would wonder why his mother didn't take custody of those coins until a day when he might understand their true worth. He would come to appreciate their worth not in monetary terms, but in the terms that he forsook a priceless gift of love from his grandfather, whose legend waxes greater with each passing year without him. Sometimes lessons are better left alone. Chapter 18. The Hometown Pugilist. 1971 was the year that Jim Morrison died. Everyone knows that. But how many remember that it was also the year Louis Armstrong, Igor Stravinsky, Nikita Khrushchev, or Audie Murphy left this earthly existence? It's hard to even compare Jim Morrison with the likes of the latter list of names, but it shows how important making a statement can be to one's legacy. Such a statement occurred one week in March of 1971. Dad started a boxing team in a small southern Oklahoma town. He had been a Golden Gloves champion for several years in his younger days in Arkansas. His prowess with his fists struck fear in the hearts of some of the bravest pugilists in the region during a stretch in the early 50s. Then suddenly, he hung up his boxing gloves at the height of his career to devote time to his family. So it only followed that someday he might mentor his sons in the fine art of self-defense and pass on his knowledge and experience in the ring. His sons, ages 16, 13, and 9, already had a rudimental understanding of the art, as many conflicts arose between the three that allowed them a working proficiency in the craft. Because of this, Lynn, Keith, and young Eric were all enamored by the prospect of a more complete comprehension of the sport. The boxing season consisted of visits to neighboring towns each week. The Adams boys represented the Warwick boxing team in 3 different weight classes: Lynn at welterweight, Keith at 90 pounds, and young Eric at 80. The whole team numbered 10 or 12 boys. The Warwick boxing team was to host a tournament in town the next to last week of the season. Each tournament lasted 3 nights: Thursday, Friday, and then the finals on Saturday. A boxer would have to win his Thursday night fight to advance to Friday, then win on Friday in order to fight in the finals on Saturday. Of course, in order to receive a trophy, a fighter would need to be fighting for the championship on Saturday night. The prospect of winning a trophy, and the laud that accompanied it, was the mission of each team member. Young Eric had marveled countless times at his dad's trophy case and scrapbook, and the chance to earn a trophy of his own filled his imagination with images of glory and adoration. The first tournament of the season began auspiciously for Lynn. He only had to fight twice, on Friday and then on Saturday, but won the tournament in his weight class. Other fighters on the team, including his brother Keith, won at least one of their early fights. But young Eric was not so fortunate. His boxing debut ended in utter defeat at the hands of Nato Castro, a Mexican fighter who displayed tactics young Eric had never encountered. It seemed young Eric had a lot to learn. This would prove to be an understatement. The next tournament was a little better for young Eric. As luck would have it, he drew a helpless kid and beat the tar out of him, ending the fight in the first round. The kid just started crying, and the referee chose to stop the fight. It appeared that young Eric wasn't so bad after all. But the intoxication that success brings is often fraught with vicissitude, and the next night brought reality back into focus in the form of a tall, streetwise black kid named Michael Rivers. Young Eric was knocked down at least once in every round. He was lucky to have finished the fight at all. It reminded him of fighting with his older brothers, never even landing a blow. No trophy, no glory, no doubt about it. The weeks that followed played out much the same. Some of the kids on the team would have good tournaments, others wouldn't. The 2 older brothers would win a few and lose a few. Hardly a tournament would go by where at least one of the Warwick boxing team members wouldn't win. But not for young Eric. Week after week, he would lose in Thursday night action. His father would offer encouragement in his corner to jab and move. But young Eric would continue to find ways to lose each bout. In fact, he had the worst fighting record on the team, at 1 win against 7 losses. Something had to give. The first week in March was upon them. It was the week of the Warwick boxing tournament. The team was happy to be hosting the tourney with a chance to show off their boxing skills to their friends and families. It was a big event for the community, and the Lions Club was sponsoring the tournament at the biggest arena in town, the Jefferson County Fairgrounds. The town had never before been host to such a spectacle, and it was sold out each night. All the boxers on the team made weight, including Keith, who decided to drop in class to fight at 80 pounds, which, coincidentally, was young Eric's weight class. Keith had starved himself all day on Thursday just to make the weight, and he did, much to young Eric's consternation. Now, young Eric's chances to win in front of the home crowd had gone from slim to incalculable, as he had never beaten Keith in a fair fight. The draw was favorable for young Eric. His first opponent was a relative newcomer. When the fight started, the first jab young Eric threw connected and sent his rival straight to the canvas with a thud, which elicited a thunderous roar from the hometown audience. It infused him with a newfound confidence, and his resolution to win was now buoyed by the enthusiastic rabble. The fight wasn't even close. and more cheers followed young Eric as he exited the ring with his proud father. It was a new feeling for him as he acknowledged the ebullient throng with a wave of his hand. It seemed that destiny had smiled on him this night, as the next match featured his older brother Keith. He was to fight Tim Cunningham, a tough little kid from Wichita Falls. He must have been too weak from his arduous dieting in order to make weight, and when the referee raised a hand at the end of the bout, it wasn't Keith's. Oh, how he must have been sick from the teasing of his friends after that fight. But his loss allowed young Eric to proceed with a zealous fortitude that heretofore had been absent. The next night was more of the same for the competition. Young Eric made quick work of an African kid named Tom Stewart from Lawton, to whom he had just lost the week before, and it wasn't even close. Again, the multitude offered young Eric screams of delight and adulation as he left the ring. This meant one thing to young Eric: a trophy. He was to fight for the championship on the next night against his rival, Joe Harrison, who had beaten him just 2 weeks prior in the Red River Golden Gloves tournament. Now, Saturday night was special for 2 reasons. First, one gets to see only the best remaining fighters, making for higher quality fights. Another was that Sandra Richardson, young Eric's girlfriend, was in the audience to watch him fight. What a coup it would be if he could win the championship trophy for her. Dad did all he could to settle young Eric down for that fight as he wrapped and taped the fighter's hands. Now, Eric, you can beat this guy. You won that 3rd round 2 weeks ago with your left hook alone, remember? Just jab and move, hook and move, and you can beat this guy. He's scared of you. He saw what you did to that black kid last night. His words were bouncing off young Eric's eardrums like raindrops on a well-polished sports car. His mind was already in the ring. His mom, who was in attendance, had made him a flashy pair of red and white boxing trunks with the initials EBA on the cuff of his left leg, and the red robe that said Waurika Boxing Club on the back completed the ensemble. The roar went up as young Eric stepped up onto the canvas and dipped through the ropes. The wave of spectator cheers subsided as the clang of the bell morphed the sound of the audience into an electric buzz. The rivals touched gloves and the fight began. The two went toe-to-toe for every second of the fight, neither backing down and neither giving up. 3 rounds of flying leather and sweat as coaches from both corners incited their fighters to give more. And finally, late into the 3rd round, young Eric heard a voice that said, "Left hook," and with all the strength that he could muster, heaved a left hook roundhouse that caught poor Joe square on the chin, sending him spiraling toward the canvas. Bedlam erupted from the hysterical mob as the final bell sounded, as Joe could only get up and walk dejectedly back to his corner. A giddy young Sandra bounced up and down at ringside, and as young Eric's eyes met hers, he smiled self-consciously. Young Eric had done the unthinkable. He had won a championship trophy. Eric would fight in mediocrity and obscurity for 2 more years, losing more fights than he won. And he was never as good a fighter as were his brothers. And he may not have been Jim Morrison, but he was Waurika's gladiator for one magical week in March of 1971.